40%. That's the number that landed on desks across Washington when the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office published its latest report on June 5, 2026, signed by Director Jon Kosloski. Roughly 4 in 10 cases investigated by the U.S. government's dedicated UAP Analysis Office remain unresolved, not debunked, not explained, unresolved. On its face, that's a staggering admission. But what does unresolved actually mean inside AARO's methodology? Is this a sign of genuine anomalous phenomena slipping through our sensor grids? Or is it an artifact of a bureaucracy still learning how to collect its own data? Understanding the 40% requires understanding how AARO sorts its cases. The office uses a tiered disposition system. Cases are either resolved and attributed to known objects, drones, balloons, satellites, sensor artifacts, or they fall into unresolved categories. Critically, AARO distinguishes between cases that are unresolved due to insufficient data and a smaller subset that remain unresolved despite sufficient data, cases exhibiting what the office terms anomalous characteristics. The bulk of that 40% sits in the insufficient data bin. That distinction matters enormously. It's the difference between we saw something extraordinary and we couldn't see well enough to say anything at all. AARO has stated that resolution requires corroborating multi-source evidence, ideally radar data paired with electro-optical or infrared imagery, supported by witness testimony and environmental metadata, wind speed, altitude, flight path, sensor calibration records. When even one layer is missing, the case often cannot be closed. Director Kosloski has acknowledged this gap publicly. In engagements with Congress and in the report itself, AARO attributes a significant portion of its unresolved caseload not to exotic phenomena, but to the fact that reporting units frequently submit incomplete packages. The evidence isn't mysterious. It's just inadequate. One case in the 2026 report cycle illustrates this perfectly. The United States Army submitted an infrared video, 1 minute and 49 seconds of footage. The object depicted is unidentified. But here's the problem. The submission arrived with 0 accompanying description, no location, no date-time group, no sensor type, no operator notes, nothing. AARO received raw video with no context whatsoever. This isn't a case of the government hiding what it knows. It's a case of the government not knowing what it has. You cannot analyze what you cannot contextualize. That video sits in the unresolved column, not because the object is inexplicable, but because the submission is functionally useless. Contrast that with the multi-day incident from October 2023 cited in the report. According to AARO's account, military personnel documented anomalous activity over consecutive days at a sensitive location, involving multiple sensor modalities and trained observers. This case represents the other end of the spectrum. Relatively data-rich, operationally significant, and still unresolved. When a case like this resists explanation despite adequate data, it carries genuine analytical weight. These are the cases that should command attention, not because they prove anything extraterrestrial, but because they represent the irreducible core of the phenomenon after methodological rigor has been applied. So, is 40% a scandal or a shrug? Critics in the disclosure community argue it represents institutional failure, or worse, deliberate obfuscation. If AARO wanted to resolve more cases, the argument goes, it would compel better reporting from the services. Skeptics counter that 40% is actually unsurprising for any surveillance analysis pipeline dealing with transient, unpredictable events captured by sensors not designed for the task. Both arguments hold partial truth. The number is simultaneously too high to ignore and too methodologically contaminated to interpret cleanly. It tells us less about what's in the sky than about the state of the bureaucracy looking up at it. 2026 was supposed to be a landmark year. The disclosure momentum that began with the 2017 New York Times revelations accelerated through David Grush's 2023 testimony and was codified in bipartisan legislation led by Senators Schumer and Rounds. All of it pointed toward transparency. And in many ways, progress is real. AARO exists. It publishes. Its director signs, reports, and faces congressional questioning. But the Army's context-free infrared video reveals the uncomfortable truth beneath the momentum. The infrastructure of disclosure has outpaced the infrastructure of analysis. We have built a front door for reporting UAP. We have not yet built the hallway behind it. If this issue is to be taken seriously, and the bipartisan consensus suggests it should be, then the 40% unresolved rate must be treated not as evidence of alien contact, nor as evidence of nothing, but as a measurement of systemic failure in data collection. Director Kosloski's report, to its credit, identifies this problem. The question is whether the Department of Defense will act on it, mandating standardized reporting protocols, requiring metadata with every submission, and resourcing AARO to conduct follow-up investigations rather than passive case review. Until then, the unresolved rate measures one thing clearly: how far we still have to go. 40% unresolved. It's a number that invites projection. Believers see proof, debunkers see noise, and the truth sits somewhere in the data we haven't collected yet. The October 2023 incident suggests some cases deserve deeper investigation. The Army's Minute 49 Phantom video suggests the system isn't built to provide it. The gap between those two realities is where the real story of UAP disclosure lives, not in what the government is hiding, but in what it has failed to adequately observe, record, and analyze. The most honest thing the 2026 AARO report communicates isn't an answer. It's the shape of the question.